So I'm Brian Katz, and I was a 2012 honoree. At the time, I was working at Desert Mirage High School in Thermal, California, and the first year that I was teaching in Thermal, I made every mistake that a teacher can make. I think I had a lot of discipline issues, and I didn't know a lot about classroom management, and I was doing my best to follow the curriculum and to follow what I had learned in my teacher training program. And after that first summer, I really reflected on, I made a list of three things. Things that had gone well, which is really hard for teachers because a lot of times we only focus on what we don't do well. So I made a list of things that had gone well, and then things that had not gone well. And then the third column was what I could do to change those things. And about 90% of the problems I had the first year were solved just by making those three lists. I was able to find some really easy solutions to some of the things I'd been doing. The biggest thing I think that I found teaching in that area, it's a migrant farming area. The average income I think is between $10,000 and $15,000 a year. Most of the students are first generation immigrants coming from largely from Mexico. And many of the students felt that if I asked them to draw something, they would say, "I'm not an artist, and I can't draw." And that was a really profound statement to me, because this idea that one is not a creator ends up affecting everything on every level of the community. And so in terms of deciding, should there be sidewalks in the community? Should there be parks in the community? Should they have a say in what kinds of classes are taught in the school? You know, how certain funding is spent within the community. And because these were unincorporated areas, some of which were on Native American land, and so even the EPA didn't have access, and so there were some environmental problems that would happen, and the EPA wasn't able to step in. I felt like a big part of literacy, when we talk about Paulo Freire, is this idea of reading the word, but also the world. And so one of the things I found, I'm an English teacher, but I found that students needed to understand the community that they were in and the various historical and political forces that had shaped their experience, as well as, and that'll be reading, and then their ability to transform their communities, which would be a form of writing, you know, within the larger world. So maybe one other thing that could be discussed is early on I was really fortunate to observe a teacher who had taught Theater of the Oppressed for over 30 years within her school. And so she wrote 5 original plays with students every year. And so she taught without chairs. And so there's a lot of brain-based research, there's a lot of multiple intelligences research. We know about play, we know about emotion, we know about the idea of students oftentimes learn better when those things when movement and emotion and cultural relevancy and is central to what's happening. And so even though I don't teach theater, I'm an English teacher, I begin every school year for the first couple of weeks without any chairs. And we do a lot of those movement games. Without building that community and without breaking down and challenging the stage, which has already been set as the classroom, it's really hard to have some of the real transformational, this is what I found within my teaching. It's harder for me to have transformational experiences in the classroom if you don't begin in a way that is really involving. We talk about the whole child, but it's hard to be whole when you're in your seat and you're very quiet. And there's that, I think, that Einstein quote about the problems we have today won't be solved by the minds which created them. And so I think that for things to transform in society, we have to be learning in a very different way than maybe we had for a long time, where we really silenced children and told them to stay still. And we taught them largely to obey. And it's very hard to create critical thinkers when you're working within that modality. And so when teachers give up the wall, and we talk about Trump and building a wall, and that wall is being created in so many ways, the walls between teachers and students as well. And so when that wall gets broken down and where there's an open and honest discussion about what's happening, because one of the reasons why students act out is because they feel insulted because what they're learning about in school maybe is so divorced from what's happening in reality. And so by talking about so many issues, instead of making the textbook the only resource, I looked at what the standards were and I said, it's going to be just as rigorous as any other classroom, but I don't necessarily have to do exactly what the textbook says. And if the students are really interested in learning about what white supremacy is, or what patriarchy is, or what globalization is, or what the push-pull factors for immigration are, then let's bring that into the classroom and talk about that in a real way if it's really some of the things that are affecting the students. And so by making those things central, and this happened over a number of years, the students realized that the most rebellious thing was just to participate in the class, because what we were creating was a kind of rebellion, yeah? And so one summer I ended up working inside of San Quentin prison, and I ended up teaching a class in there. And it was so interesting because that's what we would do is that within this space where there are so many confines, is we were trying to find liberation. And so when I was there, it didn't seem too different from what I'd already been doing within the high school, because that was the thing, is that when you teach, rather than thinking about what are the great texts that necessarily, or I don't want to phrase it like that. What does the textbook tell me to do? Another way of approaching it is where's the wound in the room, and what are we trying to heal? And there's something in the teacher that needs to heal, and there's something in the student that needs to heal. And this might be one last point, but in reflection, and I think I can say this really concisely, I know that I went to a community where a lot of the students had been uprooted, and they kind of felt uprooted from their culture or from their history, because I myself was looking for my own roots. And I know that I chose to work in the prison because I myself was trying to find freedom and trying to understand the cages that I was in, and trying to understand what it would look like to open up, what's the key that would open up that door, and do I have the courage to step out and to leave the space that I'm in. I know that I chose to work at a school for immigrants and refugees because I myself, my mother had passed away, and in many ways I was kind of looking for home and mother, and I was trying to find my place and root down somewhere, and yet I felt like the world kept uprooting me, and I felt like I didn't have a place to find home. And so I found myself around students who I had a very privileged experience of it, but in a very real way, in a very visceral way, they were uprooted from where they were, either by war or by various factors. And so this idea of we're all mirrors to one another, this was a really deep practice. And it's really been the most meaningful thing that I've experienced in my life is this kind of mirror work, where the very thing that needs to heal inside of you also needs to heal inside of them. And if you can be honest about that, and then find ways of also making the curriculum academically rigorous and giving them the critical hope pieces, then we all get better when we all get better. And it becomes this practice of seeing one another in a really true way and connecting, rather than a punitive approach, or approach that says, here's the authority that you need to model, rather than looking on the inside to what it is that both needs to heal. And so, but our culture's fear of looking at the wound, right? And there's a great book by Barry Specker that talks about the myth of American innocence. And from the inception of this country, we've not wanted to look at some of our wounds. And what happens is they come at us in very scary ways then, because we aren't willing to look at them. And so our fear of looking at the wound is reflected in the way that we're schooling our children. And that's why we react in a punitive way and build walls. And so I think that that's what we're looking for is intimacy, and to see one another and to see our connections, but that takes courage.